The ship fell from the sky like a wounded bird. It screamed through the clouds, leaving a trail of fire and smoke behind it. Commander Yethala gripped her seat as the vessel shook and twisted. Warning lights flashed red everywhere. Alarms screamed in 3 different languages. "Brace for impact!" she shouted to her crew. The crash was terrible. Metal bent and broke. Glass shattered into 1,000 pieces. The ship hit the side of a mountain and slid down through rocks and trees until it stopped inside a deep crack in the earth. Then everything went quiet. Yethala opened her 4 eyes slowly. Her body hurt in many places, but she was alive. She looked around the broken bridge of her ship. Her crew of 4 were moving, groaning, checking themselves for injuries. They had survived. "Status report," she said, her voice weak. Engineer Koth pulled himself up from the floor. His gray skin was covered in dust and small cuts. "The engines are dead, Commander. Navigation is destroyed. The communication array is completely gone." He paused and looked at his scanner, then his face became very worried. "The distress beacon is damaged. It cannot reach the fleet." This was very bad news. The Volanthi fleet was waiting far away, beyond the asteroid belt of this solar system. Without a working beacon, they had no way to call for help. But there was something even worse to worry about. "The samples," Yethala said. "Check the cargo hold." Science Officer Ven climbed down through the twisted corridors of the ship. She came back with fear in her eyes. "The stasis fields are still working, but they are losing power. The backup generators were damaged in the crash. Commander, we have maybe 3 days before the fields fail completely." 3 days. Yethala felt her heart sink. The cargo hold contained biological samples from 17 different worlds. Plants, bacteria, small creatures, tissue samples. Years of work. Species that the Volanthi had never seen before and might never see again. If those stasis fields failed, everything would die. "Can we repair the beacon?" she asked. Koth shook his head. "Not with what we have. The quantum crystals are shattered. We would need a full repair station. The anti-gravity units burned out during entry. All of them." Yethala stood up slowly and walked to the cracked window. Outside she saw a harsh landscape of rocks, snow, and steep cliffs. They had crashed on a mountain, high above any flat ground. The ship was stuck in a crevasse, tilted at a dangerous angle. Even if they could contact the fleet, a rescue shuttle would have no place to land up here. They would need to move the cargo containers down to flat ground, but each container weighed thousands of kilograms. Without anti-gravity units, without power, without any of their advanced technology, how could they possibly move them? "What world is this?" Yethala asked. Navigator Trull checked the surviving instruments. "Third planet from the local star. The natives call it Earth. Class 4 civilization, Commander. Pre-industrial. They have not discovered powered flight yet. They have basic metallurgy, agriculture, written language. Nothing useful for our situation. Pre-industrial, primitive." Yethala almost laughed at the bitter joke the universe was playing on them. They were the Volanthi, one of the most advanced species in the known galaxy. They had traveled between stars. They had conquered diseases that once killed millions. They had built machines that could think and dream. And now they were trapped on a backward world, helpless as newborns. "We should explore the area," Ven suggested. "Perhaps there are resources we can use." The crew spent the next several hours checking the ship and the surrounding terrain. The news was not good. The crevasse walls were too steep to climb easily. The path down the mountain was dangerous, with cliffs and loose rocks. Without their equipment, even walking around was risky. It was Koth who first saw the native. "Commander," he said quietly, pointing down the slope. "We have company." Yethala looked where he was pointing. A figure was climbing up toward them. It moved slowly but steadily, picking its way through the rocks with the easy grace of someone who had done this many times before. As it got closer, she could see more details. The creature was bipedal, with 2 arms and 2 legs. Its skin was brown, weathered by sun and wind. It wore simple clothes made from animal skins and woven plant fiber. Over one shoulder, it carried a coil of rope. In one hand, it held a long wooden stick, which it used to help itself climb. "Primitive," Ka said, his voice full of doubt. "What could such a creature possibly do for us?" Yethala did not answer. She was watching the human climb. The terrain was very difficult. 2 of her own crew members had almost fallen trying to survey it earlier. But this native moved through it like water flowing around stones. There was knowledge in those movements, experience, understanding that the human reached the edge of their crash site and stopped. It was a female, Yethala realized, based on the physical characteristics she could observe. The human looked at the wrecked ship, at the strange visitors from another world, at the impossible situation before her. Most primitive creatures would have run away in fear. This one did not run. Her eyes moved over everything, studying, measuring, thinking. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then the human opened her mouth and made a sound. The universal translator in Yethala's ear worked to understand it. The word came through, simple and clear. "Help?" Yethala felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt surprise. Not because the creature had spoken, but because of what she saw in those alien eyes. There was no fear there, no confusion, only a calm, steady intelligence that was asking a question. Did they need help? Yes. Could this primitive creature provide it? That seemed impossible. But standing there, looking at this human with her rope and her stick, Yethala suddenly felt uncertain. She had studied hundreds of civilizations. She had seen species with technology far beyond her own, and species still learning to make fire. She had learned one important lesson from all those studies. Never assume you know what a creature is capable of until you see it act. Yes, Yethala said slowly, activating her own translator so the human could understand. We need help. The human nodded once. Then she started walking toward the ship, her eyes already examining the wreckage. Her mind already working on problems that the most advanced beings in the galaxy had failed to solve. Her name, they would soon learn, was Marin, and she was about to teach them that sometimes the simplest tools are the most powerful ones of all. The crew argued about the human for a long time. They gathered in what remained of the ship's meeting room, speaking in low voices while Marin waited outside. We cannot involve a native, Koss said firmly. First contact protocols are very clear. Pre-spacefaring civilizations must not know about us. We observe them from far away. We do not talk to them. We do not show them our technology. Our technology is broken, Ven pointed out. And she has already seen us. Then we should make her forget. We have memory adjustment tools in the medical bay. Yethala shook her head. The medical bay is under 2 tons of collapsed ceiling. We cannot reach it. She looked at her crew, seeing the fear and frustration in their faces. I understand the protocols. I helped write some of them. But protocols assume we have a working ship and a way home. We have neither. So what do you suggest? Koth asked. Trust our mission to a creature who has not even invented the wheel? They have invented the wheel, Navigator Trell said quietly. I checked the database. This species has wheels, levers, basic construction knowledge. They are not as primitive as you think. Koth made a sound of disbelief. They cannot even fly. What can they possibly do that we cannot? No one had an answer to that question. But the truth was simple and painful. Without their machines, the Volanthi were helpless. They had knowledge, yes. They understood physics and chemistry and biology better than any human ever would. But their hands had never built anything without the help of advanced tools. Their muscles had never lifted heavy weights without anti-gravity assistance. They had evolved beyond such primitive needs. Now, those primitive needs were the only thing that mattered. Yethala made her decision. We will accept her help. We have no other choice. She went outside to where Marin was sitting on a rock, eating something from a small bag. The human looked up as Yethala approached, her eyes curious but not afraid. You decide to trust me? Marin asked. Her words came through the translator slowly. The device was still learning her language patterns. We have no choice, Yethala said honestly. Our situation is very bad. Marin nodded. She stood up and walked toward the crashed ship, moving around it slowly, looking at everything. She touched the metal hull. She looked at the crevasse walls. She studied the slope below. The Volanthi watched her, not understanding what she was doing. Tell me again, Marin said after her inspection was complete. What needs to happen? Yethala explained as simply as she could. The cargo containers in the ship held precious things. Living things. Those things would die in 3 days unless the containers were moved to flat ground. On flat ground, they could be found by friends who were looking for them. How heavy? Marin asked. Yethala calculated in her head, converting to units the human might understand. Each container weighs as much as 40 large male animals. The ones with 4 legs that your people ride. Marin's eyebrows went up. 40 horses each. And how many containers? 17. The human was quiet for a long moment. She looked down the mountain, measuring distances with her eyes. She looked at the crevasse walls, at the angles, at the rocks. Then she looked at the crashed ship again. I will need more rope, she said finally. Much more rope. And strong wood for making staffs. Also, she pointed at the bent metal fins on the outside of the ship. Can you cut those free? The metal will be useful. Koth laughed. It was not a kind laugh. You want to move cargo containers that weigh thousands of kilograms with rope and sticks. This is foolish. Marin looked at him. Her face showed no anger, only patience. I want to move your cargo with leverage, she said. And pulleys. And the mountain itself. She paused. Your tools are broken. Mine are not. What is leverage? Trell asked. What are pulleys? Marin picked up her wooden staff. She found a rock about the size of her head and placed the staff under it, resting the staff on a smaller stone. Then she pushed down on the long end of the staff. The rock lifted off the ground easily. This is leverage, she said. A small force on one end becomes a large force on the other end. The longer the staff, the more the force grows. The Volanthi watched with strange expressions. Of course, they knew about levers. This was basic physics, something their children learned in their first year of school. But knowing about something and using it were very different things. None of them had ever actually needed to lift something with a lever. They had machines for that. Marin saw their expressions and understood. You know these things, she said. But you do not use them. We have better tools, Koth said. You had better tools, Marin corrected gently. Now you have these. She held up her rope and her staff. Lucky for you, these tools do not break easily. She spent the next hour explaining her plan. The crew gathered around her, listening with growing amazement. She would build a system of pulleys using rope and wheels cut from the metal fins of the ship. These pulleys would multiply the force they could apply to the cargo containers. Using leverage and anchors attached to the mountain rocks, they could lower the containers down the cliff faces one at a time. This is possible? Ven asked with wonder in her voice. This is how my people built great things, Marin said. Towers and temples and walls. Before we had machines, We had knowledge. The knowledge never breaks down. Yethala felt something she had not expected to feel. She felt respect. This human, with her simple rope and wooden stick, had looked at a problem that had defeated 5 of the Confederacy's best minds and found a solution. Not a technological solution. Not an elegant solution. A practical solution, born from generations of experience with the physical world. "What do you need from us?" Yethala asked. Marin smiled. It was the first time she had smiled since arriving. "I need you to learn. I need your hands and your strength. I will teach you what my grandmother taught me. The old ways. The ways that work when nothing else does." She held out the coil of rope to Yethala. "First lesson starts now, Sky Friend. Let me show you how to tie a knot that will never fail." Yethala took the rope in her hands. It felt rough and strange against her smooth gray skin. For the first time in her very long life, she was going to learn something from a species that had not yet reached the stars. She found that she was looking forward to it. The next 2 days were the strangest of Yethala's long life. She had studied hundreds of worlds. She had learned dozens of languages. She had earned degrees in fields that most species did not even know existed. But nothing had prepared her for the education she received from a human shepherd on a mountainside. Marin started with the basics. She taught them about rope. Not the theory of rope, which they already knew, but the reality of it. How to feel its strength by running it through your fingers. How to know when it was too old or too worn to trust. How to coil it so it would not tangle. How to throw it so it will land where you want it. Rope is not just a tool, Marin explained while the Volanti practiced their coiling. Rope is a partner. You must learn its language. It tells you things if you listen. Koth struggled the most. His hands were made for touching screens and adjusting delicate instruments. They were not made for rough fiber. He dropped the rope again and again. He tangled it into knots he did not intend. He grew frustrated. "This is pointless," he said after his 10th failure. "We know the physics. We understand the mathematics. Why must we learn to do this with our hands?" Marin took the tangled rope from him. Her fingers moved quickly, untangling the mess in seconds. "You know how rope works," she said. "But you do not know rope. There is a difference." "What difference?" "Knowledge is knowledge." Marin thought about how to explain. She picked up a stone. "You know this stone will fall if I drop it, yes? You know the speed it will fall, the force it will hit the ground with?" "Of course. Basic gravity calculations." Marin threw the stone at a target 20 meters away. It hit exactly where she aimed. "Can you do that?" Koth blinked. "I would need to calculate the trajectory, the wind speed, the angle. I did no calculations. I just threw." Marin tapped her head. "My body knows. My muscles know. Thousands of throws since I was a child. The knowledge is here." She tapped her head again. "And here." She held up her hands. "This is what you must learn." Not thinking about the rope. Being with the rope. It sounded like nonsense to the engineer. But over the next day, something changed. As his hands worked with the rope over and over, they began to remember. They began to predict. They began to know. By the end of the second day, Koth could coil a rope without looking, could feel a weak spot by touch alone, could tie the knots Marin had taught without thinking about each step. He never admitted it out loud. But Yethala saw the wonder in his eyes. Marin taught them about pulleys next. She used pieces of metal cut from the ship's fins, shaped into wheels with grooves around the edges. Rope ran through these grooves, creating a system that amazed the Volanti, even though they understood exactly why it worked. "One pulley cuts the effort in half," Marin explained, demonstrating with a heavy piece of wreckage. 2 pulleys cut it in half again. With 4 pulleys working together, One person can lift what normally needs 4 people. We know this, Ven said. Mechanical advantage. It is in every basic physics text. Then why did you not think of it? Marin asked. There was no accusation in her voice, only curiosity. Ven had no answer. The truth was uncomfortable. She had never needed to think of it. Her whole life, machines had done the heavy lifting. When those machines broke, her mind had not even considered the old ways. It was as if that knowledge had been there, but locked away, useless because it had never been used. Marin seemed to understand. Your tools became your crutches, she said kindly. When they broke, you could not walk. This is not shameful, but now you must learn to walk again. The most important lesson came on the second night. They had built the pulley system. They had prepared the anchors. They had practiced the movements until everyone knew their role. But Marin was not satisfied. Tomorrow we move the first container, she said. But before we do, I need you to understand something. She led them to the edge of the crevasse where the ship was trapped. Below them, in the darkness, they could hear water running. A fall from here would mean death. Your machines give you certainty, Marin said. They measure everything. They calculate everything. They tell you exactly what will happen. Yes? The Volante nodded. We do not have that. Tomorrow things will go wrong. Ropes will slip. Rocks will break. The wind will blow at bad times. I cannot tell you exactly what will happen because I do not know. Then how can we succeed? Trell asked, fear in his voice. Marin smiled in the moonlight. We succeed by paying attention, by feeling what is happening, not just watching it, by being ready to change our plan in a moment. She held up her worn hands. These are my sensors. These are my computers. They are slow and simple, but they never lie to me. When a rope is about to break, I feel it before it happens. When an anchor is coming loose, I see the tiny movements. You must learn to trust your bodies like this. We are not built for such things, Yathela said quietly. Our species gave up these abilities long ago. No, Marin said firmly. You stopped using them? That is not the same. The abilities are still there, sleeping inside you. Tomorrow, they must wake up. She looked at each of them in turn. I will be watching. I will guide you. But in the end, your hands will save your cargo. Not mine. That night, Yathela could not sleep. She sat outside, looking at the stars that were her home. She thought about all the technology the Volante had created. Ships that could cross galaxies. Medicines that could cure almost any disease. Machines that could build other machines without any help. And yet here she was. Learning to tie knots from a woman who had never seen a computer dot, she picked up a piece of rope and began to practice in the darkness. Her fingers were slow at first, clumsy. But slowly, as the night passed, they learned. They remembered. They became something more than they had been before. By morning, she could tie a secure knot with her eyes closed. It was a small thing, but it felt like the beginning of something very important. The sun rose on the third day, and Marin knew they were out of time. The containers had to move today. There could be no more practice, no more preparation. Either her plan would work, or everything would be lost. She gathered the Volante crew at dawn. Their gray faces looked tired but determined. Over the past 2 days, they had changed. Their hands were rough now, marked by rope burns and small cuts. Their bodies moved differently, more aware of the ground beneath their feet. They were not experts, not even close. But they were ready. First container, Marin said. The smallest one. We learned from this one. Getting the container out of the broken ship was hard work. The cargo hold was damaged, tilted at a bad angle. They had to use levers to lift the container, slide wooden rollers beneath it, and push it inch by inch toward the hole they had cut in the hull. Sweat ran down every face. Muscles burned with effort. But slowly, the container moved. It emerged from the ship like a baby being born, sliding out into the morning light. The Volanti looked at it with wonder, as if they had never truly seen it before. "We moved it," Ven said, her voice full of surprise. "With our hands. We actually moved it. This is the easy part," Marin reminded them. "Now we take it down the mountain." The pulley system waited at the edge of the first cliff. Marin had chosen this path carefully, walking it many times over the past 2 days. It was not the shortest way down. It was the safest way, the way that gave them the best angles for their ropes and the strongest anchor points. They guided the container into the cradle of ropes and metal sheeting. Marin checked every knot, every connection, every anchor. She pulled on the ropes, feeling their tension. She looked at the rock formations where the anchors were attached, watching for any sign of weakness. "Ready," she said finally. "Everyone to positions." The descent began. 4 Volanti worked the main ropes, letting them out slowly through the pulley system. Trell managed the guide ropes that kept the container from swinging. Marin moved between them all, watching everything at once. The first few meters went smoothly. The container slid down the cliff face, the pulleys turning, the ropes creaking with strain. It was working. Yethala felt hope rising in her chest. Then the wind came. It swept up the mountainside without warning, a cold blast that grabbed the container and pushed it sideways. The guide ropes went tight, then slack, then tight again. The container began to swing like a giant pendulum. "Hold!" Marin shouted. "Everyone hold position." The Volanti froze, gripping their ropes with hands that wanted to let go. The container swung once, twice, 3 times. Each swing brought it closer to the cliff wall. If it hit hard enough, it might break apart. If the ropes tangled, the whole system could fail. Marin did not panic. She watched the swinging container, counting the rhythm, waiting for the right moment. Then she grabbed one of the guide ropes and pulled hard, adding her weight at exactly the right instant. The container's swing shifted. Instead of getting worse, it began to get smaller. Swing by swing, it calmed down until it hung steady again. "Continue," Marin said, breathing hard. Slowly, they lowered the container to a ledge halfway down the first cliff. Then they had to stop, disassemble the upper pulley system, carry everything down to the ledge, and set it all up again for the next section. It took hours. The sun moved across the sky. Their water ran low. Their bodies screamed for rest, but they did not stop. The second section was steeper than the first. Here, Marin had anchored ropes to a dead tree that seemed strong enough to hold. It was not. Halfway down, Yethala heard a cracking sound. She looked up and saw the tree's roots pulling free from the rocky soil. "The anchor is failing!" She shouted. Everything happened very fast. Marin was already moving, running toward the breaking anchor. She grabbed a spare rope that was tied to a different rock formation and threw it around the main line. The tree broke free completely, but Marin's backup line caught the weight. The container dropped 1/2 meter, then stopped, swinging gently. Marin's arms were wrapped around the backup anchor, her feet dug into the ground. The force had pulled her several meters, leaving a trail in the dirt. But she had held. "Continue on the backup line," she said through clenched teeth. "I am fine." She was not fine. Yethala could see blood on her hands where the rope had burned through her skin. But Marin did not complain, did not stop to care for her wounds. She simply wrapped cloth around her palms and went back to work. By nightfall, 3 containers sat on a flat plateau far below the crash site. The emergency beacon that Koth had jury-rigged to one of them was finally able to send its signal. Somewhere far away, a Volanti rescue ship would be changing course. They worked through the night, taking turns resting while others continued. The moon gave them light. The cold gave them energy. Fear of failure gave them strength. They did not know they had docked by noon the next day. All 17 containers were secure on the plateau. Marin sat on a rock at the edge of the collection, wrapping her blistered hands with fresh cloth. She looked exhausted, empty, used up. But she was smiling. Yethala sat beside her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. What was there to say? Words seemed too small for what had happened. "The shuttle will be here soon," Yethala finally said. "I saw the signal confirmation." Marin nodded. She looked up at the sky, at the clouds drifting past, at the stars that were hidden by daylight but still there. "You could have died," Yethala said quietly. "Several times. When the tree broke. When the wind came. When the third container slipped." Marin shrugged. "The containers were more important. Why? They hold specimens from worlds you will never see. They mean nothing to you." Marin thought about this for a moment. "They mean something to you. That is enough." She looked at Yethala with those strange human eyes. "Is that not why anyone helps anyone else? Because what is important to them becomes important to us." Yethala had no answer. In all her years studying other species, she had never heard anyone explain kindness so simply. She had written papers about altruism. She had developed theories about cooperative behavior. But this human had just said it better in 2 sentences than she had in 200 pages. The first sounds of the shuttle came from above. They all looked up, watching the small vessel descend through the clouds. Rescue was here. They had survived, but something had changed that could never change back. 5 Volanti had learned what their ancestors had forgotten. They had learned that the most powerful tools in the universe were not machines, but minds that could use anything, solve anything, survive anything, and they had learned it from a shepherd with a rope and a staff. The Volanti High Council chamber was a place of great importance. Its walls were made of living crystal that had grown for 10,000 years. Its ceiling showed the stars of 100 conquered worlds. The 15 council members who sat in their floating chairs were the most powerful beings in 3 galaxies. Commander Yethala stood before them, feeling very small. "Your report is unusual," said Council Elder Vorth. His voice was cold, as it always was. "You claim that a primitive species saved your mission?" "I do not claim it. It is fact." Yethala kept her voice steady. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment. "The human called Marin used basic tools to accomplish what our advanced technology could not." "Rope and sticks," another council member said. Her tone made it clear what she thought of such things. "You expect us to believe that rope and sticks moved 17 cargo containers down a mountain?" "Not just rope and sticks. Knowledge, understanding, skill that has been passed down through generations." Yethala stepped forward. "With respect, honored council, you are missing the point." The chamber went quiet. No one spoke to the council this way. Yethala continued before she could lose her courage. "For 300 years, we have watched humanity from far away. We have classified them as primitive, as unready for contact, as beneath our attention. But I spent 4 days with one of them, one human. And in those 4 days, I learned more about survival than I learned in 50 years of Volanti education." "What could they possibly teach us?" Elder Vorth asked. "We have conquered disease. We have conquered distance. We have conquered time itself. We have conquered nothing," Yethala said. "We have built machines to conquer these things for us. And when those machines fail, we fail with them." She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn wooden staff. She placed it on the council table. "This is the tool that saved our mission. This piece of dead tree. It has no computer inside it. It has no power source. It cannot break down or run out of energy. It works because the person holding it understands how to use it." The council members stared at the staff as if it might bite them. The human Marin had no sensors to tell her when a rope was about to break. She felt it with her hands. She had no computer to calculate the safest path down the mountain. She knew it from walking those paths her whole life. She had no backup systems, no emergency protocols, no safety nets. She had only herself, her knowledge, and her will to succeed. HFY paused. And she succeeded where we could not. One human, Council Member Treth said dismissively. One special case. This proves nothing about their species, does it not? HFY asked. This human was not a scientist or an engineer. She was a shepherd. She cared for animals on a mountainside. If this is what their common people can do, what are their exceptional people capable of? The question hung in the air. HFY pressed on. I have read our historical records. 300 years ago, when we first surveyed Earth, humans were fighting with swords and riding horses. Today, they have machines that can think, weapons that can destroy cities, and vehicles that can leave their planet. 300 years. Do you understand how fast that is? The council members shifted uncomfortably. Most species took thousands of years to progress that far. The Volanthi themselves had taken over 2,000 years to go from basic metallurgy to space travel. They are advancing faster than any species we have ever recorded, HFY said. And they are doing it without our help, without our guidance, without any contact from the wider galaxy. They are figuring it out for themselves, through trial and error, through failure and success. They fall down, they get up, they try again. This is not a weakness. This is their greatest strength. She picked up the wooden staff again. When I was stranded on that mountain, I had all the knowledge of the Volanthi Confederacy in my memory. Millions of years of scientific advancement. And I could not solve my problem. Marin had only what her grandmother taught her. And she saved everything. What are you suggesting? Elder Vorth asked. His voice was less cold now. There was something else in it. Interest, perhaps. Or worry. I am suggesting that we have made a terrible mistake. We look at species without our technology, and we call them primitive. We assume they have nothing to offer us. But technology is not the only measure of advancement. Adaptability matters. Resourcefulness matters. The ability to survive when everything goes wrong matters. She looked at each council member in turn. Humans have been surviving when everything goes wrong for their entire history. Disasters, wars, diseases, famines. They keep going. They keep solving problems. They keep moving forward. Not because they have better machines than us, but because they have something we have lost. And what is that? Treth asked. The knowledge in their hands, the wisdom in their bodies, the understanding that comes from doing things themselves, not having machines do things for them. HFY took a deep breath. I recommend that we do not wait for humanity to reach the stars. I recommend we approach them now as equals, as partners, because I believe they have much to teach us, and we are running out of time to learn. Running out of time? Vorth leaned forward. What do you mean? HFY looked at the crystal walls, at the floating chairs, at all the wonders of Volanthi civilization. When was the last time any of us built something with our own hands? When was the last time we solved a problem without consulting a machine? When was the last time we survived through skill alone, with no technology to help us? No one answered, because no one could remember. We are becoming dependent on our tools. So dependent that we cannot live without them. One day, something will happen that our tools cannot fix. A disaster, an enemy, a change we did not predict. And on that day, we will need the skills that we have forgotten. She held up the staff one more time. Humans still have those skills. They can teach us if we are wise enough to ask. The council debated for many hours after HFY left. She did not know what they would decide, but she had planted a seed. That was all she could do. Far away, on a small blue planet, Marin returned to her village with her flock. Her hands had healed. Her body had recovered. But something in her had changed forever. The Sky People had given her a gift before they left. A small device that fit in her palm. When she pressed it, she could hear voices from the stars. Distant conversations in languages she did not understand. Music that sounded nothing like any music she had ever heard. The universe talking to itself. She did not understand how it worked. But she did not need to understand. She only needed to listen. Every night, she sat outside her small house and held the device up to the sky. She listened to the voices of beings who lived among the stars. And sometimes, when the night was very quiet and the stars were very bright, she thought she could hear them listening back. She had taught them something important. Something about rope and wood and the strength of human hands. Someday, she knew they would come back. Not as strangers, but as friends. And when they did, she would be ready to teach them more. Until then, she had her sheep to care for and mountains to climb. She had her rope and her staff and the knowledge her grandmother had given her. She had everything she needed. She was human. That was enough.